Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 82. And today is another very special day, as it seems to be every Thursday.
Funny that.
It's a very special day because clearly there's a new episode of the Camera Shake Podcast coming out that you may enjoy in its full glory in the car or, in your headphones whilst you're working on your computer or whatever it is that you're doing. In fact, that would be a really interesting thing to ask our listeners is what are you doing whilst listening to the Camera Shake Podcast? That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'm usually in the bath.
Are you?
Yeah.
You actually listen to our
I
episodes,
skip my
right?
parts and just listen to your voice.
Of course.
Is that normal?
Yeah, I can. I'm on board with that. I do the same thing. I skip your parts and I just listen to my own voice.
There you go.
Episode 82. Of course, as always, be reminded that if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can not only listen to our sultry voices, but see our lovely faces in full Technicolor over on YouTube as well. Now, leave us a review, same sort of thing. It'd be super awesome because it will help our podcast to be found in the ocean of other podcasts that there are. Anyway, today we've got a few interesting things to talk about, really.
Have we?
Because I think we have.
Wow.
Yeah. A lot has happened in the world of photography.
Photography. Yeah.
Photography.
Photography.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff has come out over the last few weeks. And of course, we've had, quite a few guests on recently. So we've been able to cover some of those. One of the big announcements of the last few weeks, of course, has been the Nikon Z9. So the Z9 or Z9.
Z9, thank you.
That's, of course, has been a big launch, a massive launch for Nikon. And interestingly enough, when we spoke to Joe McNally,
yeah, that's right.
The Z9 literally came out like a day after or something we spoke to him. And so he was barred from saying anything. I asked the question, but like a seasoned pro, he managed to weasel his way out of the answer. So very well done, Joe. If you're listening, respect.
Yeah.
Excellent. So the Z9, well, it's a huge step for Nikon. It's a huge announcement. It's actually, after a good few years of Nikon's of trailing behind its main competitors.
Yeah, 10 years probably.
AKA, Sony and Canon. And they've really put something out there that's quite remarkable.
Yeah, so let's talk specs. What have we got there? Yeah. What's so special about
this? So the
Z9
is basically Nikon's flagship mirrorless camera body. So it's really there to compete with, the R3. It's essentially the mirrorless flagship version of the 1DX.
Yep.
Right. If you wanted to think of it like that, and so it's aimed at the same types of photographers. So we're talking sports, we're talking press photography, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's ultra fast, hyper supercharged, with just about anything. So it is the absolute flagship model, and it's got a 45.7 megapixel sensor. Mm-hmm. That is almost not quite, but almost double of the R3. So that is quite remarkable, especially when when you're looking at the frame rates and everything else. It's quite a remarkable achievement. It's it's a $6,000 camera.
Yeah, the double the sensor size is interesting. Because if I remember correctly, their frame rate is the same, if not higher, than the R3 as well.
So it's different. I mean, as far as frame rate is concerned, if you're a sports shooter or even a wildlife shooter, for example, then that becomes really important. We talked about this a few episodes ago. If you're shooting sports, for example, it makes a difference whether you can shoot, 12 frames a second or 20 or 30 frames per second, because you might get the perfect shot within those 30 shots. You're more likely to get the perfect shot rather than, if your camera does like 10 frames per second. But what's interesting about the Nikon Z9 is that it's the first camera really that doesn't have a mechanical shutter. So they've gone all out future shock here. It's an electronic shutter only.
What's the downside of that? Is there a downside to that?
I actually, to be honest, I can't really see a downside with that. I can only see upsides. I mean, the fact that you don't have a mechanical thing in there basically means, less chance of something breaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, like I'm still in the dark ages really with my main studio camera, so that's still a mechanical shutter and it's not even a mirrorless mode. But my main concern is things like the mechanical components in there. So I'm getting to the point where I've got to start to worry a little bit about my shutter and everything else. So of course you don't really have that problem with the camera that doesn't have a mechanical shutter. So that in itself is cool. As far as the frame rates are concerned, they've done something that's it's a little bit weird, because at the base of it, at full res, and this is like 14-bit RAW is the full resolution. It shoots 20 frames per second,
which is great.
Will totally do the trick. But on the far end, it'll do 120 frames per second.
What do you lose by going?
Well, you basically lose the ability to shoot in RAW, you'll only shoot JPEG, and so on and so forth.
Which could easily have its place to have that ability to shoot 120. In fact, now I think about it, I have seen a little video of them stitching together, a few seconds of 120 frames JPEGs, and it looks like slow motion.
Yeah,
as it would, right? It's a slow motion video.
It would, but also, if you think about it, like again, if you're a press photographer, for instance, and you're basically sending your shots back to your editor, you want to,
because you need RAW for print.
Yeah, right. No, but also there's no opportunity because speed is of the essence here. So just you're going to shoot in JPEG and you're going to basically send that stuff straight back. Awesome. I mean, I just pity the editor that has to now sift through 120 images per second.
They won't be allowing that, I'm sure.
So I don't know. I mean, interesting thing, but it's an interesting way of looking at things. I think because we don't always have to shoot in full res. It's
absolutely not.
Makes perfect sense.
Absolutely not.
And so, everything with this camera is basically set out and designed for speed. They've got this new X Speed 7 processor in there, which is hyper fast. It basically has it features 2 CF Express XQD cards. They are expensive. It's a pain in the neck, but
what's required to get that data rate across.
Absolutely. Right? If you want to get that speed going, then you have to have that. Overall, this camera really packs a punch. Not only on the photography side, but also with video. I mean, I've really gone all out. It's really hit it out of the ballpark with the video specs as well.
8K RAW?
8K. So basically, it's 8K. There's let me just see where I've got my notes. So it's 8K at 30 frames per second. Okay, 4K at 120 frames per second. Standard type thing. Apple ProRes, and there's going to be basically it's Apple ProRes, right? But there'll be a software update coming out in the very near future, which will basically allow you to record ProRes RAW at 12-bit.
That's cool.
So they're doing a similar thing. I mean, Nikon haven't really been doing that much in terms of software updates in the past, but they seem to be taking a page out of Canon's book, because Canon has sort of gotten into that over the last over the last few years. So it seems like if you've got $6,000 spare, then that seems to be like the camera that really can pretty much do it all.
Yeah, for sure.
But and we talk about the video specs. Actually, let's talk about the video specs first, because I had an interesting thought about where this camera and the tech in it is going to lead Nikon potentially. But let's have a look at the the sort of video specs. So like I said, 8K Apple ProRes, and it's got 5-axis stabilization built into the body as well. So that's cool. And the autofocus system, by all accounts, and this is really just, I haven't actually held the thing. I haven't tried it. But from what I've seen and what I've heard people say about it, is that the autofocus system has basically, they've literally brought it on par with Canon and Sony.
Yeah. So that's what I've read about it as well, is that it's tenfold better than it has been before. And just in the few, and it is only a few use cases that I've seen, is that it doesn't quite track between subjects quite as well as Canon does, and that it will lose a face slightly more often than Canon does. Slightly.
But here's an interesting thing. So what they've done with the autofocusing system, they've built in deep learning AI.
Yeah, I'll wait to see the.
This is the time of robots. Robots are taking over the world for sure.
I don't know if Nikon are on board with AI just yet.
I don't know.
Can they manage it?
It's an interesting thought because if your autofocus system actually gets better with time, how cool would that be?
I'd love to know how it's learning. How does it know that it's missed a subject?
I have no idea. I mean, basically, it probably
You need to tell it something.
Well, yes. I mean, most likely, what happens is if you are double vaccinated, it will just connect to your 5G internal body 5G tracking.
So are we saying that the Z9 gives you COVID?
No, it will fully exploit your COVID protection mechanism. That's what it does. See, that's clever. That's AI. See, listen to me. You've heard it here first.
None of this is true, by the way.
You don't know this. Anyway, actually, we both are now eligible for a booster jab because they've just brought it down to. Actually, no, you're not because you're not 40 yet.
No, I'm not.
You're not 40 yet. Well, I am, old as I am now eligible for a third booster jab.
So I've heard some bad things about a booster jab.
Really? What's that?
I've heard there's some reports of heart attacks and things like that.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's someone who's died straight after having the booster. These are rare cases, obviously. Yeah. But I have to say, unless the government do bring in, basically half the country are rejecting it right now, saying, no, I really don't want it. But this kind of happened with the regular vaccines anyway. But it seems to be more with this for whatever reason. There are definitely reasons behind it why people are like that, but it doesn't really matter. Unless the government say you cannot travel without having had this booster like they were suggesting they would, I probably won't bother with it this time. This booster. If they say they bring in the travel thing, I will get it.
Well, I mean,
but given the number of people who are rejecting it, I don't think they'll bring it in for travel.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think you've got nothing to lose. I mean, technically speaking, because I've had both vaccinations and then I caught COVID, I've technically had 3 lots of antibodies.
You smell like you've had COVID.
But if they allow me to have a 4th injection, I don't know at what time that's going to be the case. But I'll have it for sure, 100%. Definitely.
Jab me up.
100%, protect the people around you is what I'm saying. Anyway, so COVID aside, I've had an interesting, thought about Nikon and the Z9 because there's one thing missing from the Nikon lineup at this point, and that's really the one thing I'm actually waiting for, and that's the Z8. And so, if you think about it, I mean, if you make a comparison between Canon and Nikon, for instance, you've got whatchamacallit. So you've got the Z6, you've got the Z7, or Z7 II, then you've got the Z9, and you really don't have anything that directly compares more or less with the R5.
Right.
So Canon's R5 basically sits between Nikon's Z7 II and the Z9.
And Z9.
And the R3 is sort of the equivalent of the
Z9.
The Z9.
Yeah.
So what's really missing with Nikon at the moment is this kind of high-end professional camera body that would work well in the studio as well as lots of other applications, and has really really good video capability. And that's really where the Z8 I think will sit. Now, if I'm looking at the technology that Nikon's just come out with in the Z9, and my hope is that will basically down trickle into the Z8. So we're talking autofocus system, for example, video capabilities, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that could actually mean, and who knows when the Z8 will actually come out? I mean, there's rumors left, right, and center. It might be in a year's time, maybe 2 years time. Who knows, right? And of course, the thing to remember is that both Sony and Canon will already have had, time to basically progress and so on and so forth. So who knows? But that actually kind of fills me with confidence, for that kind of segment.
Well, it's
So-
just nice to see Nikon finally pulling it all back. You know, assuming the camera is as good as the specs read, and there aren't other little things going on. It's about time, and all it's going to do is drive good improvements across all the brands. Is that if Nikon are back in the game, which they clearly are, that's it. It can only be good for Canon users. And okay, here's a question for you. Do you think that this is sufficient for all the old Nikon users that moved when they started to fall behind? Do you think it's going to pull them back? This is a very high-end camera and is only for a few small percentage of people.
So this is the So this is the thing. Yeah, it is a high-end camera, and it sets you back $6,000, right? However, and this is like the thing that's really astonishing and actually a testament to Nikon's achievement in that respect, is that they've already had 400,000 pre-orders for this camera. That's for a flagship model that sets you back $3,000. That's astonishing.
$6,000.
$6,000.
Yeah.
400,000 pre-orders. The only problem with that is that they only have a production capacity of 30,000 a month. So the reality is, if you pre-ordered a Z9 now, it may take like a year until you get it. That's that's the thing, and whether they're going to address that or whether there's anything you can do about that, who knows? But
I'm sure they're working on it.
But the thing is, and of course, it is true to say that Nikon are, in terms of production capacity, not quite up there with let's say Sony or Canon. I'm sure they could probably build more cameras on a monthly basis or whatever. But
they'll come up with something. I'm sure.
But nevertheless, it is quite remarkable. Those kind of numbers. So. If they actually ship 400,000 of these machines, then respect.
Yeah.
Well, whether it brings people back to the brand, I'm sure some will. I think this is always the problem, right?
I think people are waiting for that 8, like you suggest.
Well,
right?
I mean, I think they're going to have to prove themselves possibly a little bit more. But. It's difficult. Once you've switched camera system, you've basically sold all of your glass. Yeah. You've completely switched over. And it's not only the glass, it's like everything that goes around it. It's like trigger systems, for your lights, from like, I don't know, tether cables, whatever it may be. I mean, the whole, everything on the periphery is, all the accessories, whatever. You've just basically sold all of that and reinvested. It's a major step changing from one brand to another. And especially for professionals, who basically invest a lot of cash into that gear, because I think, if you're, let's say, for instance, if you're an amateur photographer, you can probably get away with, a couple of lenses, maybe you have something that's, that gets you from reasonably wide to reasonably long, in terms of glass, and, you can probably, be happy with that most of the time.
For sure.
Not so difficult. You've got 1 or 2 lenses, you sell them, no problem. But as a professional, you typically have glass and all sorts of other stuff for all sorts of different eventualities, whether that's, and usually you end up, with pretty expensive high-end glass as well. So it's not going to be easy to really switch system. I think it'll take a lot of convincing. I think what it may do, or I'm sure what it will do actually, is that it will keep people who were on the verge of switching. It will keep people back, because these thoughts have crossed my mind, because I'm going to have to, like, my camera system is aging a little bit. I'm going to have to invest into it in the not too distant future. And that's a thought that's crossed my mind. I mean, I've actually already done the maths, think like, okay, well, if I sell all of my gear now and then I reinvest, like, how, what can I realistically expect to get for it, and how, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I mean, that basically means, not necessarily that I'm in the market to change, but it means that I'm thinking about it. And that's, that's a dangerous point to be, really. And so I think Nikon will be able to probably keep people with the brand. But basically, it's going to be easier for them to keep people loyal to the brand now than it was before they released the Z9. So that's the thing. Because if you think of the last few years, what's actually happened is there've been some advancements. Like if you go 4 or 5 years back, actually Nikon did come out with a full swing with the D850. That was a really awesome camera at the time. I mean, that came out and basically immediately that was in that segment. That was the best camera around at the time. It did help them to keep a little bit of market share and to prevent people from wandering off because as an 800 series upgrade from the D800 to the D810 to the D850, that was a cool camera.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Yeah.
Their problem has been that they haven't really kept up, or they didn't really read the market, I think, at the time as far as video was concerned, because video was becoming more and more and more important. And of course, Canon and Sony, really caught on to that. And even Fuji did, right? And so that's where I think that's where people were moving over, And of course, and after the D850, if you remember, Canon and Nikon were criticized for quite heavily for not having mirrorless bodies on the market. And of course, we all knew, everybody knew that this is the way things were going. And then, of course, Nikon announced their Z line pretty much at the same time as Canon announced the R series, or the mirrorless bodies. And so, and again, the original Z6 and the Z7 were a little bit underwhelming. But just like Canon, let's not forget that Canon made the same mistake. They were criticized for only having one SD card slot. And,
yeah, that's right.
And the video capabilities on the Nikon were better than with Nikon. And then, of course, Canon has gone full steam and released a whole array of new models and really kind of pushed the barrier of what's possible, with the R, like the RP, and then the R6 and the R5 and so on. Whilst all that Nikon have actually done is really just sort of beefed up the Z6 and the Z7, and turn it into the Z6 II and the Z7 II, which, again, actually, in a way, you can't fault them for that because they've addressed all the criticisms.
Yeah,
they've added another card slot. They've put two XP6 processors in those things, which sped things up. The autofocus system was, improved, but it wasn't quite at the same level as with the Sonys and the Nikons, the Sonys and the Canons. And that's really where people lost a little bit of trust, because autofocus is, it just makes such a massive difference, especially when you're talking about, eye autofocus. And I think, this whole thing about animal autofocus, it's like, that's really cool if you're a wildlife photographer, if you shoot dogs for a living, great. But for me, it makes no difference. I mean, some of my models can be, what do you say?
Ooh.
But, do you know what I mean? I mean, a lot of these things are so specific that they, almost to me, they don't necessarily really matter, because I don't really shoot other animals other than my dog. Like bird autofocus, cool. If you're a wildlife photographer, super awesome. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Like for me, not so much.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, so Sony as well as Canon have basically, leapt forward in massive strides, and Nikon's have been left behind in the dust a little bit. And so now what we're seeing is basically the revenge, I think. And you can argue maybe they've just held back. Do you remember when we went to the photography show only a couple of months ago? We were a little bit disappointed that that they didn't have the Z9 on show there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the R3 was the big news.
Ideal time, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the R3 was the big news at the photography show. And we at the time we thought like, oh man, that's a bit of a missed opportunity. Like, what's happening here? Maybe it was the right thing to just wait.
Yeah. What worries me about the Z9 or Nikon in general at the minute is I think they've gone all out with the Z9, and I think they're a long way off doing anything more right now. I think they've absolutely maxed out what they can do right this minute. Normally they're obviously working on stuff for years in advance, and this is not where their tech is today. But I think Canon have released the R3. I think they're well on their way to releasing whatever their next flagship will
the
be.
R1 apparently.
And it's going to be, who knows how much better it's going to be. It's hard to think what else they could all add to these right now, but we'll see. But I think Nikon are just that further further bit behind, which is okay.
Yeah,
because this is a cracking camera.
Yeah, I mean, it beats everything else that's out there at the moment, and that's really, I draw the parallel to the D850, which at the time was absolutely enough to really, to sort of change the tide for them a little bit. And of course they got a lot of applause for that camera at the time,
The timing's just always a little bit off.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that. But, again, who am I to judge? Maybe they just take it a little bit slower and therefore, come up with stuff that's very cool.
At the end of the day, they've pushed another little boundary with this camera, and that's what's important.
They're also doing a few other interesting things, because there's another bit of Nikon news. This is turning out to be the Nikon episode. Well, so Nikon have announced a partnership with Nissin and Profoto.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So two lighting companies. It's quite unclear as to what that partnership actually is, because Nikon already has, or both of these companies, by the way, Profoto and Nissin, already make trigger systems for the Nikon system. So it's like, okay, what else could they be doing? And I think the announcement that they're partnering up is interesting, especially because Profoto is obviously sort of a high end lighting company, which sort of falls into place with the whole like Z9, type of thing. So it'll be interesting to see what that actually means.
Can't begin to imagine what they're doing with that.
Who knows? I mean, I'm guessing. We're talking about interesting ways of controlling the lights from your camera.
Directly from the camera, within the camera,
possibly. That's a possibility. Who knows?
They'll sync. Yeah.
So, that'll be one thing to watch, I think, over the next.
Well, they're gearing themselves towards the higher end market, which is cool. That's 0.01% of the people out
there.
That's
those 400,000. That's the 400,000 people who've already ordered the Z9.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
That's worldwide, I assume.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Still, not bad.
It's all right.
Anyway, that's all the Nikon news we have for you today.
Whew.
What else is there in the world of, like, what else has been going on? Actually, let's talk about. I apologize for the coughing, because
it's annoying.
I'm suffering from yet another cold. That is what happens when you're married to a teacher, by the way. Like, as soon as there's any kind of cold around, happens in the classroom.
Yeah.
Then that's being
stay away from me, please.
It's too late now, anyway.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, what else has been happening in the general world for you this week?
I'm just getting excited about my new Mac, if I'm honest with you.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's a big deal. I know it's just a new laptop and whatnot, but it's a big deal. It's a huge upgrade.
How long have you been waiting? What's the waiting the delivery time?
Because I sort of and ahed for a week after they've released. You could start ordering. Rather than needing to wait a week for a delivery, I had to wait a month. So I'm not getting it for another couple of weeks yet.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So in somewhere before the 1st of December, I should be getting it roughly. Right. But it's a big upgrade. So I've got their last Intel processor, which was maxed out.
Currently.
The i 2.4 i9, whatever it was, 8 core, I think. But 8 core, which was great. Did it live up to what I expected? No, it didn't. Not quite, which is a shame. They released the M1 processor for their MacBooks, and now what they've got is the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. I won't go into all the tech specs because I'll get them slightly wrong probably, but basically the M1 Pro is, I don't know, give or take twice as good as the M1.
Okay.
And the M1 Max is not twice as good, but it's got basically the graphics power within it is a lot better than the M1 Pro. I think processing wise, it's give or take about the same. Yeah. But more graphics for someone who does video or photo, cracking. More cores. You
know what I find interesting is that currently I work. My main studio computer is an iMac 2020 or something.
I think yours is 2020. Yeah.
So it's basically the last iMac with the Intel processor. And, it's pretty much maxed out in RAM and the whole.
This is 10 cores, isn't it, if I remember rightly?
I don't even know.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
Something like that. And of course, it works beautifully, when I edit. Of course, when I edit any kind of photo. But even, with video, it works beautifully with any 1080 and 4K footage. Absolutely no problem. Of course, now we're seeing cameras coming out that shoot in 6K or 8K and so on and so forth. And that's basically where I'm thinking, okay, if we were to shoot a project in those kind of resolutions, then, how would my iMac fare?
Be interesting to see. Be very interesting to see, because I don't think my current MacBook, there are so many varying factors with it, particularly when you get to what frame rate you're shooting in. If you're shooting in 25, you might get a couple of 4K time sort of streams running at the same time, like multicam mode or something like that. You can start going beyond that, you start having problems. So you're going to need some proxies to run with it, and even then, it still will struggle. But this new one, it can run multiple streams of 8K RAW in multicam mode without even flinching.
Cool.
It's got dedicated ProRes and media engines within it, so it can play ProRes and H.265, 264 without any issues. Typically, there are problems with that. Often you need to transcode. Often you need to run proxies, whatever it might be, to get those to run smoothly, so you can actually edit. Not the case now, and that's a big deal for me. A big deal for me. So now I can run 4K projects, 4K timelines. There's a difference between having 4K footage on a 1080p timeline or 4K footage on a 4K timeline. Sure. There's a difference, and it does play back differently. Now I can have the 4K timelines with multiple streams of 4K footage without even thinking about it. I don't have the capabilities for 8K.
No.
Might do in the future. But if I do ever upgrade to a camera that does 8K and want to start shooting that way, I know I've got the laptop that can handle it. Yeah. So I'm kind of future-proofing myself a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm expecting this laptop to do me 10 years.
Well, I mean, I've my MacBook Pro has just had its 10-year anniversary.
It shouldn't have, but it has.
Yeah. Yeah, it has, yeah. It's basically a glorified typewriter now.
Yeah. The modern typewriter,
yeah. I mean, that's what I use it for, really. I use it for, I tell you what, I use it for watching movies in bed and writing blogs. Yeah. That's basically.
Yeah, just anything you need to be mobile for, which is very little, really.
It's, since, of course, I've changed just about anything and everything under the hood. It's got a new battery, it's got like an SSD drive, whatever. And I've maxed out the RAM in it like a long time ago. Yeah. But it works fine. Like we're doing when we're recording episodes where we're not in the same room together, then Nick and me, we talk to each other. We talk to our guests via Zoom, and so I would be sitting in my house actually looking at my old MacBook Pro, and you can see my iMac behind me, and that it works for that.
Yeah, absolutely,
absolutely perfect,
and it will keep working for that.
Sure.
Until it completely dies on you.
One of the main reasons why I changed that actually was I didn't actually ever have any issues with editing on it. That all worked fine. It was only when last summer we did a project that ended up being like a 2-hour timeline, blah, blah. And when I had to render it out, that's where you really felt the pinch because it took like literally 8 hours to render the final project. Like you wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, you would.
I remember.
Yes, no, but I think that was so close to the wire as well. Yeah, man, literally, it finished rendering like, I don't know.
That was hilarious.
An hour before.
Stressful, but hilarious.
Yeah, it was an hour before it went live on YouTube. It was so close to the wire. Because they would have had that render failed. There would have been no way back. No. There was no chance of doing that again. So it was rendering overnight. I remember like getting up at 7 a.m. thinking, shit, where are we?
It's only 50% pro.
Yeah, well, it was,
Yeah.
So that very much, I mean, I think I was as nervous about that as I am currently, because one of my main hard drives has failed. In fact, my video hard drive has failed. And I just had to replace that. And I'm trying to drag all the data off of that and copy it onto the new hard drive. And it's like, it works for a while and then it cuts out and I have to start again. So it's just a little bit gut wrenching. It'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
I'll be able to do it, but it's just annoying.
Yeah.
And that's why you should always back stuff up, which I am doing. But,
That's it. Got to have a good backup plan.
Yeah.
I actually had my hands on the 14-inch version of this new one the other day. And,
all right, cool.
They're a bit heavier. They're chunkier than they used to be, but they've got more ports again. So it kind of needs to be. They've done it in such a way that there's good airflow. It's part of the reason I've gone for the 16-inch because it's got even better airflow going through it.
Cool.
Unless you're doing 1,000 things or the most intensive 3D rendering or something like that, the fans don't even kick on.
No.
There's no fan noise anymore.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
I remember being on like Zoom calls with you whilst you were rendering something and the fans came on there.
So you were running with Zoom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, terrible. So it's exciting. It's very, very exciting to have like I can't even remember how many cores, like 24 cores of GPU. And so they use unified memory because it's all kind of in part of the same chip.
Right.
And unified memory is a combination of RAM and the memory that your discrete graphics card had. So I've had, like, my current MacBook had 32 gigs of RAM and 4 gigs as part of the graphics card, like Vega or whatever it was.
Right.
Giving you what I say, 32, so 36. So this has 64 gigs of RAM, unified memory, which is RAM and graphics, and it just shares whatever it needs at whatever particular moment to. That's my understanding anyway. I'm sure someone out there will correct me, but that's my understanding of how it works. And it can process like 400 gigabytes a second data transfer rate, and that's the benefit of the Max versus the Pro, which can only do 200, I believe, give or take, there or thereabouts. Right. So it's interesting. It's going to be really interesting. I can't wait.
Cool.
I'm super excited.
That sounds good. Yeah.
But yeah, I might do a few little comparisons and see what happens.
That's it's always the thing, like when you're working with major major amounts of data, then the more processing power you have, the better, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're always think of it this way, like if you're not really doing video, and if you're processing photos, for example, then a machine like that is potentially overkill.
Yeah,
because you don't.
That's completely overkill from the 99.9% of people out there. It's, I've seen a load of tests on these particular MacBooks right now, and I think the consensus is you don't need any more than 16 gigs of RAM on it. You don't need any more than the 8-core version of the Pro processor. You don't. And
the thing is, like, of course, editing on mobile, as in like on iPad, is has really become a thing over the last year or two. So iPad Pros are now so capable that as far as image editing and processing is concerned, there are a lot of reasons for why you would want to switch to editing your image on iPad Pros. In fact, our friend Frank has just recently changed to editing almost everything on
he went mobile, didn't he? Yeah.
And he only had positive things to report. So, interesting thought.
Yeah. It's worth reviewing. It's one of with that. It's one of those. Do I need to take my laptop with me wherever I'm going for a couple of days, or can I just do everything I need to do on my iPad? And actually, there's a good chance the majority of what you want to do, you can do on your iPad.
I personally think that this for me would be an interesting option when it comes to tethering. Like when you're on location and you're tethering through to a laptop. If you could do that easily with an iPad Pro, and I don't know whether you can. So correct me if I'm wrong. Or actually, in fact, leave a comment, or send us a message if you know anything about that. But that's what I always think, like, rather than having to drag a whole laptop with me, a laptop stand and all the rest of it, if I could just, tether through to my iPad, I'm pretty sure it must be able to do it. It's not that I've ever done.
I'd like to think so.
But, that would make life easier. I'm pretty sure actually you can with Capture One. See, that's something to look into. But anyway, so, other than that, my only gripe, this isn't really a gripe, is that, when I moved from doing all my editing on a MacBook Pro to an iMac, apart from the fact that the screen is bigger and more
Superb,
beautiful.
right? Yeah.
It's really excellent screen. It's just for me posture wise, it's made a massive difference because I used to when I used to edit on my laptop. If you imagine you got the laptop in front of you, you're kind of looking down by default, unless you have like an elaborate laptop stand or whatever. But I always found that I was like really hunched over, and it really made a difference to my back and to my neck and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one massive improvement I've found. Moving to an iMac. It's just that I sit in with better posture. And I sit straight up, and I'm looking straight at the screen, and that's made a huge difference to me.
Yeah.
So that's why I personally wouldn't go back to editing on a laptop. Personally,
you can't underestimate the benefits over time of sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
Particularly as you get to, your age.
Advanced age. That's right, yeah.
Have you got your bus pass yet? I forget.
No, but I forgot my Zimmer frame in the car.
So. There you go. Fine. You can't underestimate it.
No.
I get bad backs. I've done for years and years and years and years. And I'm always find myself sitting wrong.
Yeah.
I think, don't get up, sit properly.
Yeah.
It's why actually after most podcasts, because I hunch a little bit because I just lean forward.
But even for your main editing, like in your studio, you're basically just plug your MacBook into a port, and then everything's on a massive screen. So
exactly.
So you're in a sense you're kind of in a way you've got the advantage of being mobile with the MacBook, but then at the same time when you're actually doing most of the editing, you're actually looking at a bigger screen and you're actually sitting with better posture. So that's one way. That's one way.
Absolutely right. And it makes a huge difference. I can tell sitting in there for 8 hours versus sitting perhaps at a table like this, or sitting on. Let's face it, we all do it. We sit on the sofa and edit. I can tell the difference. I know how I'm going to feel after 8 hours of doing that. So get yourself a decent chair, get yourself a proper desk.
Yes, exactly.
Even if you've got your MacBook, and make sure it's at the right height. Should be looking at like about 3/4 of the way up the screen. That's where your eye line should be.
And if there are any standing desk manufacturers out there that want to sponsor this podcast, please get in touch.
Hello, Varidesk.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. What else?
So more on the MacBook in a few weeks.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're going to have to do something when it arrives.
You'll know when it arrives because I'm going to start the podcast like this. Super smiley.
Cool. It's going to be great for our podcast guests as well because they're going to... Is the camera improved?
The front camera. We use this camera anyway, don't we, these days? Yeah. But yes, 1080 on the front.
Cool. Okay, so what else has happened this week? Nothing terribly exciting. Other than that, there are a number of projects in the pipeline, which is good. So some interesting stuff. I went to see a motorcycle garage or motorbike garage.
We haven't even spoken about that yet. Yeah, how'd it go?
That's very cool. I mean, it's very interesting. It's actually really interesting.
Did you get all greasy?
No, but it will once we do that shoot. Yeah, for sure. It is. Yeah, I mean, it's a really greasy. It's what you imagine a motorbike garage, workshop to be like.
He's a greasy lover.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's dirty. It's like full on, lots of tools. It's really, really, really cool custom bikes. Small place, but I've got an idea for like an environmental portrait in there. So I went to see the location yesterday, and it's going to work really well. So
awesome.
And they really have. They're basically customized bikes.
Mm-hmm.
So anything from Harleys to Triumphs to whatever. And some of them are like custom built. Very, very, very cool bikes. So
cool.
Yeah,
looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be good
fun. Yeah.
The interesting thing about a shoot like this is always, for me, it's actually, obviously having the right location is absolutely key. But then, putting the whole thing together, there's going to be 5 people in the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And, making them all do interesting things in the photo. That's one thing. Making sure that everything fits together, from the clothing to the way they're greased up, to everything else. Yeah, I mean that's
phrasing.
As always, what gets me always is lighting the environment.
Yeah.
And I've got some really cool ideas for that. With the multiple lights hidden in the background and stuff like that. Because it's also a band photo type of a thing. This is the whole idea of it. What will be interesting is to integrate some musical items in this but to integrate it into the workshop. So the idea really is that it's not like a typical band photo where people are holding instruments. It's basically just 5 guys, in this garage environment with motorbikes and all the biker stuff around. And I mean, let's face it, there's 5 guys. It's not going to be the Chippendales, is it? I mean, it's going to be a band photo, right? So, but the idea really is to integrate these.
The thunder from down under.
Well, the idea really is to take, some of those musical instruments and integrate them into the background, so they're not obvious and they're just kind of hidden in it. And if you don't look hard enough, you'll probably miss them.
Okay,
that's sort of the.
What type of musical instruments are we talking here?
Well, we're talking about
guitars, drums, bass.
Yeah, bits of it, like a snare drum, for example, an electric guitar or whatever.
I'd like to know where you're going to put his drumsticks.
Well, they may or may not feature. I mean, it's like you've got racks on the walls with tools and all that. So it's it's a cool place. It's going to be a cool place. It's going to be freaking cold.
Hang a guitar in amongst the tools on the wall. Yeah,
or just buried in between an oil barrel and
I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, I can't overemphasize how important it is when you do location shoot like that. How important it is to really have really supportive location manager.
Christ, yeah.
That's the thing. So the good news there is that we've got total freedom.
Totally flexible, are they? Yeah. That's good.
And
that's great.
In this case, of course, because obviously bikes are going to be featuring in the whole shot. There are many really super awesome bikes to choose from. So so that should be cool. That's
awesome.
That's something that's probably, hopefully, going to happen this side of Christmas. But yeah, interesting thing.
Love it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So
good fun.
That's cool. What else? Oh, well, I mean, there's one other thing we can talk about, maybe, and that's another little techie thing. Actually, I tell you what, no, let's talk about this other thing first, because this made me laugh. For all the Instagram users out there, Instagram are now apparently paying creators for Reels to lure them away from TikTok. It's called the Reels Play Bonus Program.
Really?
Yeah.
Who came up with that snappy little title?
I don't know. But of course what's happened is, TikTok is hugely popular. They've just surpassed 1 billion active users per month. And these are active users.
That's amazing, actually.
That's pretty huge. And, if my wife is anywhere to go by, TikTok is really used in a completely different way from the way that people use Instagram. And
absolutely.
So, obviously Instagram came out with the whole Reels thing, and then now obviously trying to lure creators away from TikTok. And so they're offering them cash bonuses. Now get this though, cash bonuses, we're talking anything from $600 to, get this, 35 grand.
Okay.
So
I actually wonder whether that's enough.
Well, I mean,
given that's probably some of the people they're targeting are probably earning a hell of a lot more than that on TikTok.
Well, but there's no clear way to define, what the factors are. Because basically, there's been a number of cases where, two creators have been offered in the region of 8.5 grand to create a reel, right? One of them had 800 followers, and the other one had 24,000 followers.
Huh.
So the amount of followers that somebody has doesn't seem to be much of a factor.
Best get ourselves on TikTok then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that being said, if you are not already following us on Instagram, make sure you head over to Instagram. It's @CameraShake Podcast. Join us there. That'd be super awesome. We'll always let you know when something's happening or when a new episode comes out. Clearly, plus of course you can support us there as well. So yeah, interesting little Instagram thing there.
Yeah, well, let's see where that heads.
Yeah, but I'll post a reel for $600 even.
Yeah,
that's cool. But if you want to pay me 8.5 grand,
I'll do 2.
I'll even do 2. Well, there you go. Buy one, get one free.
Bit of bog off there for you.
Exactly. So,
super.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, I find that quite.
I might keep an eye on that, because I'm not surprised that they're doing it, but I just wonder whether it's going to work.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it will. I mean, if anybody offers you that kind of cash.
But I'm sure, well, again, that maybe they're not going after the, quote unquote, the major players. because they won't get them for that kind of money.
Well, I think for 35 grand, you'll get somebody to pose a reel for sure.
But I don't know if it said in the article or not, but is this to move them to Instagram or just to create a reel?
As far as I understand it, it's for one reel.
Wow. Instagram, you've got too much money.
Clearly.
Well, they clearly see that that's the way forward for them. I wouldn't be investing in that kind of cash.
Well, what can I say? The Zuckerberg is behind all this, of course.
Well, yeah, true.
For sure. So,
true.
Who knows? Lastly, what else is new? Well, DJI is new. I mean, that's the other thing. Here's a DJI, right? I hear it DJI, but it's of course DJI. Does anybody say DJI?
I'd just say Digi.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a weird thing.
Yeah, it's odd that
nobody even knows what that even means. Anyway, if you know what that even means, then
someone in China does
for sure. Anyway, so the Mavic 3, the new Mavic 3 is out. Very interesting thing. As far for all the drone lovers out there, I mean, that is a killer thing.
Yeah,
we've worked with drones a little bit in the past, and we've always complained about one thing or another, whether that's flight time. Whether that's low light capability, that sort of thing. That's always been a problem sometimes.
Yeah,
I would say, and so this new Mavic 3, which comes in 2 versions, by the way, we'll talk about it in a second. That seems to again be hitting, the ball out of the ballpark.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah. So what's the difference between these 2 versions?
Well, I mean, first of all, basically the Mavic 3, where it really kicks it is in flight time, because they've just basically moved flight time up from like 30 something minutes to 46 minutes or something.
Okay.
That's a major improvement.
Quite an increase.
Like my Mavic Air lasts 20 minutes on a battery, which as a result, I have 3 batteries, but I keep it in the air for 20 minutes. And as you know, when we've used it for filming, I mean, yeah, you can get quite some footage out of 20 minutes, but then you got to land it, change the battery, bring it back up, blah, blah, blah. It's a bit annoying. This one really comes with, 46 minutes flight time per battery. I mean, that being said, of course, it does depend on what you're doing in those 46 minutes, how fast you're flying, whether you're hovering, whether you're filming video, whatever. I mean, all of that will happen. Right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, that's vastly improved battery life. That in itself is actually very cool. These flight batteries they're called intelligent flight batteries, and they're really quite expensive. So, you're looking at probably something like, I'm guessing, around about 150 quid per battery or something like that. So it's...
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So the more you can get out of one battery, the better. Right. So that in itself is actually...
How does that compare to the batteries that you use, for example?
I mean, mine were still like 90 quid or something per battery.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I have 3 of them, which lasts me usually for pretty much anything and everything we're doing. But yeah,
I mean, you're always going to want, unless you're doing it as more a hobby than anything else, but you're always going to want a second battery for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any drone pilot who doesn't have spare batteries, and but it has to be said that with a flight time of 46 minutes, you can get a lot done with one battery, and so depending on what it is that you're doing, you might actually get away with not having a spare, or maybe having one spare.
But even if you got that second battery, you'd get an hour and a half's flight time for an additional 100 odd quid.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the existing ones, you're getting for the same amount of money, you'd still only get 40 odd, 45 minutes, right?
Yeah. So I mean, that's that's a major achievement. What's really changed with this one is the sensor they're using. So they're using a 4/3 sensor. They actually have 2 cameras built in, and of course they teamed up with Hasselblad again. So the cameras are pretty amazing. The footage I've seen, it's a 20 megapixel camera in there. The footage I've seen has really been outstanding, I have to say. I mean, I saw some footage, where I've really brought out the raw image from super underexposed, and the detail in the shadows was amazing, and it didn't break up like I know it does, when I fly my drone. So it's really, the low light capability is fantastic. What they've done is actually they've included 2 cameras on this one. Again, that's interesting. So one is like a 24mm wide cameras, f2.8, standard kind of thing you would expect. But then they've also included a second camera with a 1/2-inch sensor, which is 162mm at f4.4. So what you've got there
that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, 163mm, that's a super decent telelens, basically.
Yeah, it's cracking.
So seems pretty. There are some caveats with that because you can't use a camera to film in 4K or whatever. I mean, there's some caveats with that.
Okay.
And maybe that's where the improvements will come over time. But generally speaking, I mean, you've got 20 megapixel sensor in there. It films 5K at 50 frames per second. And again, some of the video footage I've seen online has been really outstanding.
Does it actually look 5K?
Yeah, I mean, it looks, from what I've seen, it really does look amazing.
Yeah, because so much drone footage I see is 4K.
Yeah.
But just the quality of that 4K may not be as great.
Yeah.
It's just...
Well, that's true, and that's actually true for my Mavic Air. Certainly, I mean, it does shoot 4K, but the 4K isn't.
4K is not made equal.
No, exactly.
It's
so and it just
you've
break
got
up.
to see this footage.
Yeah,
right?
and it does break up easier. But again, from what I've seen, it's been remarkable, remarkable difference. One of the main difference between the 2 versions that I've released, the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Cine version, is other than the price, because the basic Mavic 3 is going to set you back just under £1,900, which is like whatever it is in dollars. You tell us, like $2,000 or something. But the Cine version sets you back £4,300.
More than double.
Yeah, so it's quite a lot. But one of the major differences is something like, for the internal storage. Like the internal storage in the standard version is 8 gigabytes. It's the internal storage, and the Cine version has an SSD storage in there of 1 terabyte.
Okay. What's the advantage of? And I'm assuming with the 8 gigabytes, you can put a card in, right?
Yeah.
Okay. SD card?
Yeah, it's a micro SD.
Super cheap.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay. Convenient to have it inbuilt.
Yeah.
Potentially inconvenient. I'm guessing you need to connect directly to your to the drone to take the footage off, right? Rather than just popping an SD card
and that is actually a little bit annoying. But the other difference is between the standard version and the Cine version is that the Cine version allows you to film in Apple ProRes.
That's cool.
And that, of course, so the standard basically films in the typical H.264 and 265, which is cool. No problem with that. But if you're shooting 5K, then Apple ProRes will come in handy.
Yeah, for sure.
So again, if you're really going for the highest possible image quality on this, then the Cine camera will definitely give that to you. Although,
and that'll definitely help. There's more data going through. It's not compressed.
Yeah, I mean, they've added some.
Not compressed. That's incorrect. It is compressed, but in a different way and a lot less.
Yeah, I mean, they've added some interesting other things to it, like the obstacle sensors. They sort of create a 3D map of where the drone is, and that's that seems to be working really quite well. So, it's definitely the drone to get. I think.
I question the more than twice the price for those editions, I have to say.
I mean, again, it just depends.
ProRes is a codec. And being able to transfer that amount of data in between and whatnot. But that's a lot.
I guess it just really depends on what you're using for. I think if you already own a DJI drone, and you want to upgrade to like the latest and greatest Mavic model, then the Mavic 3 will absolutely do that for you.
It sounds awesome. It sounds cracking. I love the new features you went through.
I mean, the price
I'm not sure I'd go for the. Is it Cine? Did you say? Is that what they're calling it? I'm not sure I'd go for that personally.
I mean, the Mavic 3 in itself, it's a major price hike from the Mavic 2. So you're gonna have to invest something into it. But I think what you're getting for that is, it's probably worth it. I think, previously to that, before they announced that, there was this sort of thing between the Air 2 and the Mavic 2, and I kept thinking, well, actually, you're better off with the Air 2 because actually it does everything that the Mavic 2 does, and it sort of does it better. But with the Mavic 3, it's definitely worth. If you've got some money to burn and you're looking at buying a new drone, that's definitely something to look at.
Well, it's pricey, isn't it? Because I've been considering getting one, but I'm not sure I can, given that I've got a new MacBook coming and whatnot, I don't think I can stretch to another couple of grand on a drone.
Yeah, $2,000 is quite heavy.
Yeah, it really is.
Oh, somebody's sawing something, if you can hear that in the background. Excellent.
Anyway, we'll try and talk over it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's really all I've got in the tech world.
Man.
This week.
I do love a little techie episode every so often.
Every so often, yeah. Now, if you've made it to this point in the episode, we're thinking of adding a new, slightly more educational segment to the show where we teach you something. So if that's something you're interested in, again, please get in touch. Send us a little message. You can get in touch on Instagram, on Facebook, and of course via email. It's camerashakepodcast@gmail.com. Or just leave us a little comment if you're on YouTube. That'd be cool. Again, remember, if you're listening to the audio version of that, leave us a little review, give us a little star rating. That would help us immensely. Other than that, that's all we've got for you today.
Let's do it.
That's episode 82 in the bag.
See you later.
See you next Thursday.